Welcome to this video about codependency. This video is going to talk about differences between codependents, empaths, and self-love deficients, and how we can exist in this world and move beyond these things into a more sovereign, self-loving version of ourselves. So, what is a codependent? A codependent relationship is where we've got one person who is a bit of a hero, a bit of a fixer, a bit of a savior, and another person who has some high needs, maybe who has an addiction or who doesn't feel stable by themselves. And so this is a perfect storm where the one person needs the other and the other person needs the other. So there's one person who needs to fix and needs to be a hero, and another person who needs to have someone enable them and prop them up. And so this kind of relationship can go on for a really long time. And sometimes on our journey, we wake up and find that we are propping someone else up long term, that we're enabling someone long term, and in doing that, taking away their ability to stand on their own 2 feet, their ability to go inside and find inner strength. And we're getting this need met in a strange way of being needed. And so one of the ways that we can address this when we start to wake up and realize this is what we've spent a lot of our time and focus on for sometimes many years is a journey towards self-love sufficiency. Self-love sufficiency. And when we are committed to that journey, no matter what, even if it's difficult, even if it causes us to have to really change the ways that we make decisions and approach people and situations, if we're committed to that self-love sufficiency, our codependent behaviors start to drop off. They start to fizzle away naturally. Because we start to notice right away that if we're trying to overly help someone, especially if they're not even asking for help, in order to make ourselves feel okay, it's no longer a fit for us the way that it used to be. Because we've come to a place where we love and accept ourselves without having to prove ourselves by these outward actions of loving and saving and enabling. We also have the idea of empaths. What is an empath? An empath is a highly sensitive person who is able to feel the feelings or the mood of another person who's in the room, often in their own body. So if you're an empath, you know what it's like to walk into a room and there's someone who is sitting there kind of stewing and angry, even if they're not super angry on the outside, and suddenly you start to feel in your body that tension and that inner conflict. It's not coming from you. You're picking up on this energy that's in the field because we're all connected. Some empaths are physical empaths, and they're able to be somewhere and someone has a physical symptom and they actually feel that in their body. And so empaths have a very finely developed nervous system beyond what a typical person has in order to have their feelers out. And often empaths are like this because they've been through some kind of trauma, often in early childhood. So if someone who is already a sensitive child is in a home where there's a lot of disruption, maybe it's unsafe, maybe there's abuse, maybe there's a lot of yelling and screaming, that child has to learn how to recognize what's going on and how to stay safe. They need to have their feelers out to protect themselves. And so their way of adapting to the world as a little person was to have an extra ear open for slamming doors. It was having an extra eye open for a change in the body language or the facial expressions of a dominant person. And so we develop these kind of spidey senses with our nervous system if we are empaths. And not only are we highly sensitive to what's going on around us, we end up being able to feel the feelings of those people. An empath can possibly be codependent. This is because that empath that grew up in a home like they grew up in had to develop skills of soothing, fixing a dominant, disruptive person, probably a parent, in order to create an environment of safety in the home. They're really good at finding a person who's got a problem going on, who's creating a disruption, creating chaos, and then calming them down. And then that child themselves felt calm. And then as that person grew up as an empath, maybe not even knowing it, they find themselves in similar relationships with other people that have problems. And they can self-soothe by soothing that other person. So some empaths end up being codependents. When an empath goes on a journey of self-love sufficiency and starts reevaluating all of their relationships, seeing their role in codependent relationships, seeing their participation in those, and starts to step away and goes on this self-love journey, that empath starts to become a non-codependent. That codependency will fizzle away. They start to become self-love sufficient. And not only that, they become something that I have noticed the term flying around, super empath. A super empath. So a super empath would be a healed or healing empath. And that person looks a lot different than they used to. A super empath is a bit of a nightmare for manipulative people. That super empath might still be a calm, laid-back person who is generally agreeable. And they might get mistaken for someone who could be easily manipulated. But if they've gone on that self-love sufficient healing journey, or they're on it with a commitment, then when a manipulative, disruptive person comes along and wants to suck energy from that person, they're in for a big surprise. So that super empath develops the ability to see a manipulative person a mile away because of everything they've gone through. That super empath is going to notice body language, facial expressions, tones of voice that remind them of difficult people they've dealt with in the past and distance themselves from. And so when new individuals come along that have those similar traits, they're going to be very aware, maybe even triggered. And that super empath is probably a pretty polite, laid-back individual and isn't going to really say much. But if that new manipulative person that they've kind of identified with their spidey senses comes along and wants to suck energy or take advantage of a situation, the super empath brings a big surprise and often is very quick to directly and calmly state the truth, state their boundaries, say no. Something that they probably were unable to do many years ago. Something that's taken a lot of blood, sweat, and tears to get to this point. The beautiful thing about a super empath is they still have the ability to sense the moods and the feelings of the people around them, but they're no longer manipulated and swayed and overtaken by those sensations. They can choose to just use the information as data to protect themselves or distance themselves from certain people, or to step in with compassion and understanding and a listening ear if that is what the situation calls for. And so these people end up, after going through the self-love sufficiency healing path, they're able to really respond to a very large spectrum of human feelings, moods, and behaviors beyond what a typical person can respond to. Even a super empath can't spot every manipulative troublemaker that is coming along wanting to be an energy vampire. But what they will do is notice quickly, notice a lot more quickly than they used to, and then make a decision on the type of space they want to keep between themselves and that person and how they're going to do that. And the nice thing is that super empath doesn't need to go around making harsh boundaries all the time. There's a period of time in the healing journey where we as healing empaths have to start making boundaries, start letting people know what will and won't work for us, and using our voice and using our will. And it can be a little bit tiring, it can be a little bit difficult and often uncomfortable. But a time comes on the healing journey, I promise, where as a super empath, people will be able to tell. People will be able to tell what you're going to permit and not permit long before they get close in your energy field and you're like, oh my goodness, this person's too close and they're sucking energy, and how did this happen, and oh my goodness, I need to make boundaries. And a point comes where those people won't even want to get too close into your space, because they'll see from afar the way that you conduct yourself in the world, the way that you're able to say no, the way that you're able to make confident decisions, and they'll realize that you're not easy picking. They'll move on to somebody who's a little bit easier to manipulate. And so at a certain point will come where you don't even need to loudly make these boundaries anymore. And if you get to that point, you know that you've come a long way on your self-love sufficiency journey. And if you're starting off on your self-love sufficiency journey and you don't know where to start, the best place to start is getting really used to your own body. When you think of a person that you know, or a situation, or even a group, how do they make you feel in your body? The first thing that comes to you, do you get a knot in your stomach? Does your heart start to race? Do you start to feel resistant or avoidant when you know that you're going to be coming in contact with that person? If you're constantly overriding your body and continuing to participate in these situations, even when your body is giving you a full no, then you're not really on that self-love sufficiency journey. If you're starting to listen to your body and notice the type of situations where once you get out of them, you're totally relieved, and then you start to make plans and allocate your time and focus based on what your body is telling you, then you're on your self-love sufficiency journey. And it's not always comfortable. Changing our patterns and our programming is one of the most difficult, painful things that we can do, especially as adults, if we've been in the same patterns with the same types of people our entire life. This is very courageous work. And it is spiritual work too, because we're following our inner guide. We're following our inner spirit. We're following the sensations that our body is giving us when we've been overriding them and ignoring them for many years. And so that's going to be really uncomfortable, and it could be even surprising and confusing and make people around us angry that we're making changes and prioritizing our own wellness. That's why self-love sufficiency is a really difficult journey to go on. So when you think of a certain person, when you think of a certain environment, when you think of a certain situation, how does it make me feel? Is it in line with my future? Do I want to be around this thing a year from now? Another thing that we get trapped in sometimes is worrying about hurting other people's feelings. Or maybe that if we're creating space from certain people or situations, we don't really have unconditional love. And this is a time where we need to ask ourselves some pretty deep questions about unconditional love and what that really is. A lot of people think that unconditional love means being ongoingly accommodating, ongoingly smiling and accepting no matter what treatment we're getting, and just going along with what everybody else wants, people pleasing. Some of us have grown up believing that that is unconditional love. But sometimes if we're doing these things as an adult in all situations, it's actually a trauma response. It's actually us doing the same thing that we did when we were 5 years old, when we were being accommodating and pleasing and soothing to a really chaotic, disruptive adult that was maybe unsafe. It was our way of calming the situation and avoiding conflict, because conflict was really unsafe for us in the home when we were young. And so we call this unconditional love and unconditional patience. And if we're finding ourselves doing this while we're adults, it could be a trauma response, and it might not be coming from a deeply loving place. It's a difficult teaching, but we need to learn that there is a spectrum of working with love, and self-love is part of it. It's not just loving others. Is the decision that I'm making and the behavior that I'm exhibiting both loving to other people as well as loving to myself? Am I honoring someone else and honoring myself? Because if I'm only honoring other people and putting myself aside, then I'm only working with a fraction of love. Sometimes making a loving decision doesn't look like accommodating those other people. Sometimes the most loving decision that we can make is honoring and self-respecting ourselves first. And if that causes someone else to have an emotional explosion, a burst of anger, a bunch of resentment, then maybe we're not around the right kind of people. Maybe we're around unhealthy people. Because if you need space, if you have just a need of being with yourself and taking care of yourself, it should never make somebody else angry. If someone is really for you, they will honor you taking whatever space and time and care that you need for yourself. And so sometimes us elevating ourselves and choosing self-love sufficiency, even if it causes a massive negative reaction in someone else, even if it causes a massive negative reaction in a family, you are on the cutting edge, the forefront of a self-love evolution that's going on this planet right now. And the people that are energy suckers, the people that don't honor our decisions to take care of ourselves, they need to be left with their own karma. They need to be left with the results of their decisions. And this is a really hard teaching for some people. It's a really difficult decision to make sometimes. But when people are not honoring us and not respecting us in an ongoing way, and we withdraw our focus from those people, they might be angry and yell and scream, but they're actually receiving the results of their behavior. It's like if someone is constantly throwing a rock at your head, every time you pass a certain neighbor's house, they're throwing rocks. You're no longer going to walk by their house. At some point, you're going to realize this is what they do. It's unsafe for me physically. And even though I love my neighbor and I'm this unconditionally loving person, I realize that walking by their house is a poor decision. We have to think of our physical wellness and our physical safety the same as our emotional safety. And if that person is throwing rocks and wondering why we're no longer walking by their house, well, I think it's pretty obvious, So if you're taking care of your physical safety and you're putting that as a priority, your emotional wellness deserves to be right up there. Sometimes we're in situations where we have a person who is very dominant, very manipulative, potentially a narcissist, and we're in close contact with that person, maybe because of our family situation or something where we can't make an immediate space from that person. And in that case, I would suggest using what is called the gray rock method. The gray rock method. You can find a lot about this online if you Google gray rock method, but in a nutshell, when you're with that person, if you have to be with that person, you give short, non-committal answers to questions. You keep the interactions short. You avoid arguing no matter what they say, no matter what they try and poke. You keep your personal information private, and you don't display emotions. If you have anger or grief or sadness, you express that once you leave the situation and process your emotions elsewhere. And you minimize the contact as much as possible. As much as possible. You can wait long periods of time before responding to text messages or voicemails, things like that. And then after leaving the situation with this difficult person, check into how your body felt while you were there. Get really, really used to, okay, how did my body feel around that person? And then make a commitment to yourself to continually honor how your body makes you feel in certain situations, and then make future decisions to more and more and more honor what your body is trying to tell you. And from a coaching perspective, what do you want your life to look like? What kind of people and situations do you want to have in your life? If you look at your life maybe a year down the road, are you still spending time with this person? If so, why? What can you implement to shift out of a connection with somebody that's treating you in an ongoingly disrespectful way, so that in a year from now, you're not in the same situation anymore? And how to deal with the guilt of leaving certain people behind if they are not able to have respect and honor for you. This is really difficult when it's a close family member. We have to always go back to our why. We have to go back to our why. Why are we making these decisions? What happened? And I don't advocate rehashing the past and brewing in the past for too long. But sometimes over time we forget about what happened and how difficult it was and how painful it was to be around somebody who was not agreeing to honor us and respect us. And so if we start to feel sad or guilty, or we're missing that person and we're thinking about all the good times, it's a really good exercise to go back to your why. What actually happened? What is this person's pattern of behavior? And it's quite likely that you ended up creating space from a person like this because they were unable to meet you halfway, because these people were not willing to respect you, they were not willing to honor you. You were pushed beyond what was appropriate, and it showed no signs of changing. You probably gave plenty of chances, and yet it was like your voice wasn't heard. And so at a certain point, we are the fool if we continue to participate in relationships like this. We shouldn't be complaining to anybody. We shouldn't be a victim, because we're willingly participating in relationships like this. And the only answer If someone is showing you who they are, if they're showing you a pattern that they want to cause problems and they want to be manipulative, we need to believe those people. No matter what they're saying with their words, we need to believe their actions and their patterns and pay attention to those patterns. And then it's our responsibility what we're going to do as a response. Where are we going to put our focus? Where are we going to put our energy? Are we going to keep going back over and over? Even if it's a family member, even if we have history with this person, even if they have, their own traumatic past, their own addictions, and we have maybe reasons why we've felt sorry for them in some way. Maybe we felt that they needed us somehow and they wouldn't get by without us. But if that were actually true, if they really needed us and they valued us, they would probably find a way to respect and honor us so that we could support them. So if someone's refusing to respect and honor you, they probably don't really need you. And so go back to your why. If you're feeling guilty about stepping away from someone who you've got history with because it's no longer healthy for you, go back to your why. Why am I stepping away? Who am I doing this for? We have to put on our own oxygen mask first. We have to love ourselves first. And self-love can be very painful when we start off on a real self-love sufficiency journey, because we start having to take that sword, that mental sword, and cut away things that are sucking our energy unnecessarily. We need to take responsibility for sticking around places and situations that were not in our best interests and that were dragging us down. And we need to also recognize when someone is unwilling to change and unwilling to meet us halfway. And without demonizing them, without blaming them, just accepting that that's where they're at. They're showing us who they are. They're showing us that they don't value meeting us halfway, and now it's up to us. What are we going to do about that? And so, self-love sufficiency, self-love journey is not all about bubble baths and chocolate bars and massages. It should be about those things. Those things should be included in there from time to time. But what it's really about is the decisions that we're making. The situations we are giving our energy and time to. That's what self-love is. And deep down, for many of us who have been through a difficult childhood that has brought us to this place, our biggest resistance is the possibility of finding ourselves alone. Some of us would rather be with a difficult, manipulative, toxic person than be by ourselves. And so it's like we prefer the devil we know to the unknown nothing. And that's okay until it's not okay. And on a spiritual journey, if you're somebody who prays, someone who believes and intends for divinity to bless them, to give them spiritual experiences, to bring signs and synchronicities and more connection to the universe. If you're that person and you've put that intention out there, sometimes the people and the situations in our life that are out of alignment with our greatest good, that are out of alignment with universal law, they're going to get loud. They're going to get more uncomfortable. They're going to poke us more and test us more. Because the divine is looking for people who are able to honor their own truth and respect themselves and be sovereign. And so if you've asked for more connection with the divine, you will get that. But the divine will come and clear out of the way things that are out of balance. People that are out of balance, situations that are out of balance are going to start getting really loud. And as uncomfortable as that can be, and as lonely as that can be, and how difficult that can be, you're being met. Your prayers are being answered. And the cleaning process is working. It's starting. If you're finding yourself in that situation, but it's starting to get a little bit dicey, and you could use some support, I'll link my coaching website in the description, and I also have a question and answer in my services where you can send in a question for feedback. And this is a topic that I love to work with: codependency, empaths, self-love, sufficiency journey. So I'd be happy to support you that way. And thanks for watching this video. Comment and like if it was meaningful for you. And see you next time.